Welcome to today's episode, the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. It's Friday, May 2nd, the end of spring. Today we're talking about three middle-aged couples who like to vacation together. The show is The Four Seasons. It's on Netflix. We're reviewing the first episode. If you had to throw some comparisons out the gate, what would they be?
Nobody Wants This.
Another Netflix comedy.
Yep, Netflix have romantic comedy.
Sure.
And then I had Your Friends and Neighbors. I felt that the tone of both those shows were somewhat similar.
Your Friends and Neighbors was about John Hamm stealing watches.
Yeah, but it was
And
a comedy also.
He was not getting a divorce. He was trying to keep his family together, right? He had already
Right.
been divorced. Yes?
No, yeah, when it comes to the stories, they were different. But I thought that the tones, I guess because they were both comedies, were similar. And then I had No Good Deed with Ray Romano, because if I remember correctly, I think I only ever watched the first episode of that, but that dealt with couples too, and that was also Netflix. And then BoJack Horseman, because both are dramedies.
Right. I think the Four Seasons primarily are about older. Nobody Wants This is about the beginnings of a relationship. I think if you're looking at like Couples Retreat, Friends from College, Friends with Kids, like it's all about the elder years or the ones where the marriage has been around for like 20 years.
Well, not only that, this series, like the cast is older than I felt like people in the 1981 film
Absolutely.
were.
I have the cast from the 1981. Their ages, Alda going first was 45. Carol Burnett was 48. Len Carew was 41. Someone was 44, 56, 49. A lot of people in their 40s.
Right.
In this, Steve Carell's 62. Then you have Tina Fey's 54, Will Forte's 54, 55, 55, 49. And even the youngest person who comes in, not in this first episode, but in the 1981 film, she is 27. She's going to be 32 here. So I think they aged everybody up by like 5 to 10 years.
Right.
But mostly that's because Tina Fey's been trying to get this done, I think, for 10 years. So and she wanted all her friends to be part of it. So that makes sense.
It was also strange because I never had really heard of the Four Seasons movie, and I thought that it was maybe going to be like a classic, but it only has like a 76% on Rotten Tomatoes, a 6.8. I know it was a box office success, but it's weird that like she chose this out of all the things she could make.
She had already seen it when Alan Alda starred on 30 Rock with her many years ago. And so she talked to him about it and asked him if she could use the rights to make her own version of it. And eventually, I guess he said yes. But we both watched the 1981 version in preparation for this show. And what'd you think? Like, what was your overall impression of the original?
Was not a big fan of it.
Okay.
I thought that even though it's billed as a romantic comedy, it really is just more of a drama with mostly unlikable characters and a lot of them just kind of having to overcome their own demons and kind of sadness about growing older. And I thought that maybe if I saw it back when it actually came out, I would have liked it more because there's been so many across like the decades that have followed the same story. But yeah, I wasn't a huge fan.
There's certainly been an evolution in comedy. The 1980s were 40 years ago. Alda is now like 88 years old. And so like, I agree with you. There was a lack of actual funny comedy in the original. It was more situational humor, jealousy. But the remake has a lot more like setup punchline, you know, and it stars a lot more like, I know Alan Alda was a comedian in MASH, but like MASH was also a very serious show. Well, 30 Rock and Last Man on Earth and whatever else, Steve Carell's The Office, those are all more joke comedies, right?
With Steve Carell, it's always interesting what you're going to get because you might get the Michael Scott, the Brick Tamland, Anchorman, Space Force Carell, or you're going to get the more serious, The Big Short, Vice, The Patient Carell, and I felt like that was more what we got this series.
Well, you know, when Tina Fey and Carell have worked together in the past in Date Night, that was just a fun comedy, right?
Yep.
So that's what I expected going into this. I didn't expect them not to be together, though. It's actually Tina Fey and Will Forte's character, Kate
that was
and
a
Jack.
surprise.
And so Will Forte's character, Jack, is actually the same character that Alda played in the original. So he's kind of the voice of reason, at least for the first couple seasons. And the first episode is the first of two parts of the spring season. So they're not able to put the full season into one. There's an 8-episode series. Let's highlight the main, I guess, similarities of the two from the original to this. Okay. I would say that the plot relatively goes in the same way. Friends are carpooling together to a vacation spot near a lake. They host a dinner together.
Yep.
Nick confesses about wanting to leave his wife during a hike, this time in front of both friends rather than just Jack like he did in the film.
Right. This time it was also Danny.
And then they also have this boat outing where everybody decides to get into the water and they're having a blast.
That was the happiest I felt the show got in the TV show and the movie. And also Nick, he has a kid that's in college. He talks about that.
At least for everybody but Nick, I think everybody's having the best time in the spring
Yes.
setting, right? And then later on, as the movie progresses and they get angrier with Nick and Annie may or may not be as prevalent, it's just that's where you see the devolution of like other relationships.
What would you say the differences from the movie were?
There's a lot of them, but I still have more
Oh,
for
okay.
similarities. The names are virtually the same. Claudia is now Claude because instead of a heterosexual couple, they've changed it over to Danny and Claude. And then their daughter is still in college, the daughter of Nick and Annie. And then Nick's reason for leaving Annie is actually very similar, even though he has more to it. Like, I feel like they give in the show more substance to him saying Annie doesn't do anything because you see her playing this Farmville game a lot. You see her struggling to like not wanting to be as outgoing as the rest of the
That
crew.
scene also seemed like just the scene in general where Nick is talking to them seemed longer than in the movie.
Yeah, Steve Carell brings an extra element of like emphasis to feeling completely out of the loop when it comes to his wife. Like he doesn't love her, and I think the original Nick played it a little bit lower key because it was the '80s,
Right.
and like they just didn't show emotion in the same way, at least in the acting. But guilt tripping Nick. That's similar because both Danny and Jack go after him a little bit for wanting to dump his wife right after their 25th anniversary. Moments between every single couple, that was just like in the movie. None of them, like, I think I disagree with your idea that none of them were likable characters in the movie. I think that none of them were actually mean spirited. They would talk behind each other's backs, but you could still tell that they were friends. And so there's a lot of shows we do these days where everybody's so cynical or like they're playing an evil character that you're supposed to
It's
root
always
for.
sunny, kind of.
Sort of ish, but like I feel like in this, they still do care about each other as a friend group and they want the best for each other. However, you do see someone like Tina Fey's character in let's have to Kate's character, where she really doesn't like Claude talking to him. I think she finds him to be a bit of an idiot. And then with Annie, she's also a little like rolling her eyes when Annie goes and buys like what 50 of those figurines at that one store. And then the Vivaldi score, the springtime of the Four Seasons, was playing in both the movie and also the show. And then there's in both the movie and the show, even though they're all in their like 40s and 50s, you would think that in today's economy that like their money would be more of an issue. But they
Right.
all live close to New York. They all seem to be very happy and
Well off.
lucrative. Yeah, like their businesses are all thriving and they're able to do all these fancy vacations everywhere. So that's really not coming up. And I thought that might change in the update, and it didn't. So those are the similarities. You highlight the differences.
Updated references for one. Definitely 1981 takes place in 1981. This one present day, they bring up Etsy. Also, Annie has an obsession with Farmville or something very close to it on iPad. And then Nick even uses the word incel at one point, obviously a new term. And then there were the same-sex couple that we were talking about, Danny and Claude. That wasn't the same
I
way
don't think
in
they
the
could have done
film.
it back then.
Yeah, no.
That would have
And
been very progressive of them back then.
and then we already kind of talked about the couples being at least a decade older. It's funny that Steve Carell is probably the oldest out of all of them because I know Carol Burnett in the movie was, but he's in his 60s and he's the one that's kind of like has the most midlife crisis per se. Like he's the one that's probably going to, if you've
He's the
seen the
one
movie.
who's complaining that he has the most energy.
Right.
And that's why Danny's character, instead of like in the original series where they didn't really have too many things to give him an option out, was just like, go cheat on her, go have sex with someone else. Like, like you don't have to be monogamous. Just get this out of your system and then come back to Annie.
And so also talking about almost date night, Jack, there's a scene where he's speaking to Kate. And I found it funny because he tells Kate about what Nick is planning on doing.
Right. That's different than the film because I don't think they even discuss it with their significant
Right.
others when they find
No,
out.
no, no, that
But they're
was
they're more open, I would say, in this.
But I found it funny because in Date Night, there's a very similar scene where Steve Carell's character tells Kate that like one of their close friends is getting a divorce.
How much do you remember about Date Night? Because I did look up some stuff, like some facts in case like this was at all similar, and all I could see is like apparently Matt or Mark Wahlberg had to be shirtless in every single one of his
Yeah,
scenes,
right.
and they had to shoot it in a way that covered up his tattoo on his left shoulder.
I don't remember that much
The more
about
you know,
it.
right? I also have a quick game for you, but we'll get into that later. So we're going over the negatives here, or not the negatives, but
Differences.
the differences. And I also want to point out the fact that they have a bigger car because in the
Hmm.
first scene, when you see the movie, everybody is in this like wagon,
Yeah,
you know?
packed in.
And I think it's all six friends. Well, in this case, it's only four of them, and they're heading off to where Nick and Annie already live. That's their first vacation, it seems like. Or maybe they just got there first, right?
Right.
And then they just live close to that lake. And also the personalities, I think that's what you were kind of driving at, are as opposed to being kind of laid back. And I feel like the original movie, you could tell me that they improved a lot of it, like it was just basic conversation. While this, it's just more zip, more energy, more stuff had to get done in 27 minutes to keep your attention. Their lives are certainly more busy, like you were talking about with updated references, mostly technology, right?
Right.
Phones, iPads, smart cars, apps, like appointments.
And they touch upon everyone. Nick gets the most kind of story in the first episode, but we also learn about Danny has a 70% blockage, and he's going to be like a stent is going to be put in his heart, right?
Right. He's going to get a stint next week, but then he's also trying to avoid that. He also wants to go out to this work thing, but he kind of just wants to get away from Claude, it seems like.
Yep.
So they're showing the little breadcrumbs of what could be the problems in all their relationships. It's also shown that in Will Forte's or Jack and Kate's relationship, he has a better memory than her. And she also has a difference in opinion of whether or not soulmates exist. I feel like their conversations were more candid in the show. They were talking about things like, again, monogamy, true love. And in the past, it was more like, oh, Anne's taken up the hobby of taking picture of fruit,
Right. Right.
or
Right.
vegetables.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I see that different. I also find it ironic that even though Alda originally wrote the film to try to say that he was a bad friend for not giving his friend support when his friend did leave his wife or do something similar, um, it's in this storyline, even in 27 minutes, where we see just a lot more purpose to why Nick is leaving. I know I said that sort of earlier, but like it's kind of weird how much we're not supposed to like Annie in the
Right.
first segment. And it's almost like it's setting you up so that if she does disappear later on, that we won't feel as bad.
I agree with you because one of the, like, I guess, saddest parts of the movie was the fact that Nick is just such a dick, and you do feel bad for Annie. And they never really try to redeem Nick's character in the movie.
Yeah, and in the end, you're learning that Alda actually saying, no, Nick was a good guy this whole time. It was me who had to learn as Jack's character that I was being too judgmental. And it's like anybody watching it now would come away with a different impression. So they changed the gear to it and made Steve Carell play that role a lot more empathetically. And so it's the extra fun at the end of the episode when we find out that his Annie has actually decided they should all renew their vows,
Right.
or that those two should.
Well, what she's doing is she's throwing a surprise vow renewal ceremony for their 25th anniversary.
And so I feel like for the second episode, there's a high degree chance in this comedy that he's going to explode and he's going to be like, I want to break up, like right in the middle of
Right.
things. And that happened all off screen in the movie. It was just one segment they were there, and then the next segment she wasn't in the second
Right,
one.
because in the movie, it's 4 seasons, so there's time jumps. Like, even when, Nick in the movie gets together with his younger girlfriend, we don't even see them meet. It just suddenly kinda happens.
Right. Yeah. Okay. There was no way not to talk about it, even though that doesn't
Right.
necessarily happen in the first episode. Anything else you want to note for the differences?
Yeah, Kate and Jack seem to be the only ones happily married in the TV series.
They're the only ones who have sex in
Right.
this thing in their friend's place. It is Jack's place then, because they were like, yeah. So the first vacation spot is actually where one of them lives, which I also think is quite different than in the movie where they were all in the city. Yeah, and then just Claude and Danny's relationship. I don't think Danny was quite as he certainly wasn't making crawfish. They were shown cooking together in the movie, but I don't think he was making crawfish in the first part of that. And also, he just seems more energetic as a whole. And Coleman, was this Coleman Domingo?
Yeah, Colman
Right?
Domingo, yeah.
Who I mostly know from Fear of the Walking Dead, where he was in the first episode my favorite character. The way they introduced him was a lot scarier than later on in the series, where he just kind of became a nice guy.
Well, he's, like, really famous, right? He's done a lot of Broadway also, I think.
He has, but I think that was his first like real breakout role in television, at least. And so behind the show, I'll get into some production facts for you. Tina Fey's company, Little Stranger, is involved in making this. 30 Rock, Kimmy Schmidt, Mr. Mayor, Girls Five Eva. So they basically just follow her career. She made it. So three showrunners: Tina Fey, Lang Fisher, Tracy Wigfield. They all worked on 30 Rock together. However, I found it interesting. Fisher also co-created Never Have I Ever, and Wigfield developed Saved by the Bell, the 2020 version. In the 2020 version, if you read what the description is, I know we watched it, but it's been a while. So the series is set 26 years after Zach and Kelly's wedding. This starts 25 years after Jack and, I know I keep on saying Jack, but his name is Nick. Yeah, Nick and Annie's wedding. Yes.
And this also almost came out 44 years to the date of the movie. The movie came out April 30th, 1981.
44 years? That's what you
Yeah,
said?
yeah.
I thought you said 34. Yeah.
No, 44 years. The movie came out April 30th, 1981, and then this came out May 1st, 2025.
Mhm.
So literally a day later.
Netflix had to beat out Apple and Amazon on the project. Apparently, there was a bidding war. I think this was right after the writer's strike, and so it made sense. People were starved for content. They heard Tina Fey had a new project coming out, and they were like, "Give me." And then Alan Alda and Marissa Bregman, who was the daughter of the film's producer, who passed away in like in 2018, I think. They're both executive producers on this. I find it interesting that the Four Seasons has been used so much, like that title.
Right. Yeah.
Before I'd even heard of the film, or when I first heard of the film, I had no idea what it was going to be about, because I know there's hotels with the name, movies with the name, shows, bands, arenas, restaurants, card games. And so, but honestly, I thought it was probably going to be like Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. I thought it was going to be like a backlash, like
Like a
Kareem.
Jersey Boys?
Yeah. Do you know how the Four Seasons, the Frankie Valli version, got its name?
No.
It was actually named after a bowling alley at Union Township, where they were from.
Oh, wait, yeah, I think that's said
In the play?
Yeah, in the play.
Yeah, and then also, do you know how the hotel chain got its name?
No.
It was originally supposed to be the Thunderbird Inn, but believe it or not, that was already in use. So they had to go with the Four Seasons.
I
Yeah,
wonder how Apple would have treated this differently
it
than
feels like
Netflix.
an Apple show because it's
Right.
got a small cast. It feels like it would have had a home at Apple, for
But
sure.
also, I remember Apple kind of came out a year ago saying we're not going to make as many TV.
But it feels like platonic to me, like a Seth
Right.
Rogen, Rose Byrne. Instead of Rose Byrne, it's Tina Fey. It feels like Jason Bateman has his Netflix thing going, and Tina Fey like shouldn't be in the same sphere because they're like the same version of the same person.
Well, you could tell me it was a Peacock show too because of all the people that have a tie to NBC.
All right, so if you were to talk about the four comedians there, Will Forte, Tina Fey, Alan Alda, and Steve Carell, right? I
Right.
got a little game for you, and it's four different facts, and you have to match it to the person. I won't tell you whether or not you get it right or wrong until the end, okay? But each of them falls to one of the people. During a charity for Boys and Girls Club of Venice, this person made the joke of saying if someone donated $100,000, they would take them out for yogurt 2 times a year until they were dead, as a joke. And then someone did donate $100,000. So this person has to do that every single year now.
Is it
Twice.
Alan Alda?
I'm not going to tell you, but
Oh, okay.
that's your guess.
Yeah.
While doing a show where they were talking about their mother's passing, so this was probably like a stand-up special, 2 audience members in the front row started making out.
Okay, I'm gonna guess Tina Fey.
That's your guess? Okay, Tina Fey. This person was hit by a car while they were on a bike. Turns out the driver was a big fan.
Steve Carell.
Okay. And the last one, only person to win acting, writing, and directing Emmys for the same show. Other people have won acting, writing, and Emmys independently with different shows, but this is all with the same show.
Okay, so flip out the Alan Alda one with that one, and then the first one would be Will Forte, because I feel like Alan Alda, especially with MASH.
You think he won it for MASH?
Yeah.
Okay. You got them 100% correct. Right. Yeah, correct. I went correct and right, and I made it into Flipboard. But wow, that was good. I thought you were off on a bad note because the first one you said was Alan Alda. But yeah, Will Forte has to go around and have yogurt with this guy named Eric. 2 times each year, which sounds like a pretty interesting, like, deal. Like, if you have $100,000 to spend, now you have 2 dates on your calendar every single year that you can go hang out with, Will Forte. It all seems like they bonded over the show. There were a lot of articles. You can take it for whether or not they're real, but Tina Fey and Steve Carell said that they weren't really friends on date night. They didn't talk to one another. They didn't
Interesting.
hate each other, but they were too shy to really communicate. And this show was quite different, and it was the first time they got to like really hang out. I thought Tina Fey and him had starred on in Get Smart, but that was Anne Hathaway. That was Anne Hathaway.
Yeah, it was like 2008 too. That would have been 2 years before Day Night, but yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then some weird notes just for me personally. I've been watching like different or paying attention to things. Napoleon has come up 3 times in like the last week for me. In the Kareem book, it's all about how he's used to serve Napoleon, like his food. The studio, I watched episode 5, and Quinn is watching the Joaquin Phoenix version of Napoleon as she's having sex. And then and in this, Will Forte is making the joke as Jack, he's trying to bond with Claude, and he's given him a Napoleon book.
So that's going into my pros. That was probably one of my favorite jokes. I've already kind of talked about it, but everyone in the cast, I was excited to see Tina Fey, Steve Carell, Will Forte. You could say those 3 names and put them on any project. I'd be interested in at least seeing the pilot. Here, the cliffhanger I found interesting. I like the Napoleon joke. I even liked all the parts where they jumped into the ocean. That
The
one scene.
ocean, I think it was just a river.
Yeah, the river, because again, it was the happiest that the show
It's
got.
funny because in the 80s, I think they were literally in like a canoe, like it was a really, really tiny, and
Right.
now it's just like a full boat with a motor. I don't know if that's a change in technology, but I don't even think that people had the ability to have those motor boats in the 80s, like like they were commercially available, but I don't know if you could just rent them out like that you could today.
And then the episode was short. It was only around 30 minutes, and there's only going to be 8 of them. And then it seemed like all the actors also got about the same amount of runtime, I feel like.
Hmm,
So
really? I
that's how I felt about it. Different?
I don't think that Danny and Claude got as much runtime as the rest of the 4, and I don't think Annie's been shown that much. Like, only time we see Annie is when she's doing something that Steve Carell can then look at the camera or at his friends and be like, "See, this is why I wanna dump her."
Maybe, maybe that's fair. And then, but going into my cons, I felt like the show's characters, actually, this is what we were just talking about, Katie and Claude, they haven't really I haven't gotten a good sense of them yet.
Kate?
Yeah, because I know that she's married to Will Forte, and she almost seems like she's supposed to be like the main character of the series. But aside from her just kind of talking with Will Forte, we haven't gotten a lot of like her backstory.
Will Forte wears his heart on his sleeve. He really loves Kate. Jack really loves Kate, and they make a big deal about how he has these memories and they've had rough patches, but they've gone through them, and he's just a loved teacher. She is more like, I guess, pragmatic in her mindset of like, we're together because I do love you, but love is just sort of a construct that we've created in humans when really like it's just about evolution and procreation and stuff like that. She's so I think that that'll be where their fracture exists, but that doesn't mean that they're going to get divorced at any point. I think they're still going to find a way to make it work. They've made it work thus far.
Also, just when it came to Nick, I didn't like how they tried to make him more sympathetic.
You didn't
as
like
we
that.
talked about. Yeah,
I thought it would have been insufferable if we'd had to watch 8 episodes of this guy that we don't like. We're supposed to, by the end of, feel something for. You
well,
know?
I think maybe that's also just attributed to the fact that I wasn't a big fan of the pacing. You said 2 episodes for each of the 4 seasons.
Which scared me at first. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also feel like that's just too long. In the movie, every single season takes like what? Like the full movie is like under 2 hours, and now we're gonna have 4 hours of just different things.
I think they filled it with more things happening per vacation because that's just the way vacations work nowadays. But also, there's way more one-liners because it's more comedians altogether. I know Carol Burnett was a big, like, she had her own show
Right.
for the longest time where she did comedy, but like it feels like comedy has changed. There's a lot more writers in that room making sure that like every joke lands, and so there's a lot more, I guess, activity going on as you're watching the show. Now, I will agree with you that it doesn't make old age seem fun or middle to old age seem fun because what you're getting away from is like in teen rom-coms or in coming of age youth stories, they are always doing the craziest shit, the
Right.
wild stuff that could be the worst or best day of your life. But like the sky's the limit. Your potential is there. In this, the craziest thing that they do is like go out on a boat for like a second and jump in the water for 10 minutes. And that was like a big day for them. It just
Right.
makes that time of your life seems so much less looking forward
Well,
to, you know?
also, yeah, and that kinda attributed to the slow moving thing, like, was the pacing a problem for you like it was for me?
If I had to point out a weakness, I think it improved upon the movie, but I don't think that it completely defeated what that I think that's just an inherent flaw with concentrating on like a this is 40, but like this is more like this is 50,
Right, and
you know?
that's kind of so I agree with you. I think it was better than the movie, which I'd give like a 4 out of 10, but this series, I can't put it to passing. I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10.
A 5 out of 10 to me is just a basic, like regular run of
Right,
the mill
because there's
series.
nothing wrong with the series. If you were like, "I binged it," I'd be like, "Yeah, I can understand it with the talent involved." I guess I was just wishing for something more.
Hmm. I thought it surpassed the movie, but I do also think that if they try to add more craziness in there and they weren't willing to go full raunchy or all out comedy,
Right,
which sometimes they've tried to do, but if they try to make 50 or 60-year-old people play super young, like make them act so immature, then it comes across, bad sometimes.
right.
Maybe with this cast they could have pulled it off, but I think they were all kind of looking to just they Tina Fey in one interview said that it was sort of the Adam Sandler type comedy where she gets to bring in all her friends and they get to choose a vacation spot, in this case 4, and they got to just hang out together in sandals and relax. So
It
like
feels like yeah, it feels like this was more made for them than
right.
almost the
But
audience. Because you're saying yourself, like, they get to kind of vacation and do whatever,
well, I
and
also just said, like, there are movies or times where you have 50, 60-year-old people playing, like, teenagers or kids, and it doesn't work. Grown-ups, like, that is the Adam Sandler equivalent, where it's like, you could get that crazy stuff happening, but it does not come across well. What was that movie, the Hubby Halloween one, right? Where, like, everybody's trying to kill him? Like, there's a good reason that this is grounded. It's sort of taking place in reality. It's just more bang for your buck when it comes to the jokes that people in real life in these type of situations wouldn't be constantly rifling off.
what have the reviews for this been?
They've been okay. It's got like a 6 point something on IMDb. A Guardian gave it 4 stars. So like overall, there haven't been like too many places to review it. I think it has a 68 on Metacritic. But yeah, so a 5 out of 10 from you, and I'm glad we watched it.
Oh, one thing that you didn't mention how Alan Alda, the kids in that movie, are his actual kids.
Oh, in real life?
Yeah, in college, like, the kids that they visit in college are, like, his
He
actual
only has one
kids.
in college. Yeah,
Well, yeah, but,
it's his
like
daughter. So
right.
that's his real daughter.
Yeah, his real
It's
daughter.
weird how that kid, had they cast that person, would be too old to play one of the roles in this now.
Yeah,
That's how long ago that movie was made. If they were to make this show, in 40 whatever years, Carell would be over 100 years old. Like,
that's crazy. Yeah, that's
that is nuts. I don't yeah, that's crazy.
well, and
Thanks.
even if they were to equal out, like, Carell in his 40s, that means that this would have had to been made 20 years ago when he was still on The
He
Office.
couldn't have done that because he was still a virgin at that point. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.